I'm Angela Stalkup, and this is my overview of my research paper, Shawshanking It, The Shawshank Redemption as Equipment for Living for the Dying. So you'll see here I'm using the illustration of a tree, and I've broken it into 5 sections to give you the background of why I chose the Shawshank Redemption, why it's important to me, how the literature relates, then going through the methodology and data analysis, the conclusions, and then some possible areas for further research on the therapeutic use of film. So jumping right in to the introduction and thesis, before I give you my thesis statement, I think that a little background is going to show why I chose this movie. And this is a picture of me and my mom, my dear mom, Kay Stalkup. And at this time, she was vibrant, the picture of health. She was living the anti-cancer lifestyle, and we knew for sure she was going to live to be 100 years old. Until in 2011, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and in her case, sinus cancer, a very rare cancer that is usually not even discovered until it's too late for the patient. And so the doctors gave her 6 months to live, even with the most aggressive treatments available. She decided she was going to beat that and that she was going to beat cancer, and she didn't, but she did live for 18 months. And so about the time this picture was taken, and she was doing very well, had passed the 6-month mark, was improving, one of the nurses in the oncology center that we went to for treatment shared a story about her observation on patients like my mom who beat the expiration date. And so she said that really when they give someone a diagnosis, a terminal diagnosis, the patient does one of two things. She said, one, they either go home, sit down, and die. They just give up. Or they go home, and this is her exact words, they get busy living. They get busy doing the things they love with the people they love. They focus on life, and oftentimes they beat the odds, and sometimes even beating cancer, and there's not really anything medical science can say as to the explanation of why that is. So the nurse didn't say it, but my mom and I instantly said, well, that sounds like the famous line, get busy living or get busy dying from the Shawshank Redemption. And so given our experience, I really felt like I wanted to explore this thesis statement. The Shawshank Redemption is equipment for living for terminally ill patients and their families, seeking coping strategies for dealing with an unchangeable situation. So if Burke's theory is correct, that literature provides equipment for living, well, who needs equipment for living more than the dying? So I thought this would be a very interesting way to explore the topic. Moving into the literature, I've got a quick outline here of the 4 pieces that I chose from our list: Adams, Burke, Young, then Zhang Zhao, and Yang, or Zhang et al. For the purposes of this presentation. And from those 4 pieces of literature, I came up with 4 themes where the literature overlapped. So first was looking at how literary forms can be containers of meaning as equipment for living. Burke and Zhang and et al. Discuss that. Then audience creates meaning, creating their own equipment for living, Adams and Young. Next, narrative as ontology and identity, that storytelling is the equipment for living, and that the individual and group can use storytelling to negotiate identity and ontology, Adams and Young. And then finally, narrative privilege. Who has the right to write stories? Well, the Adams and Zhang proposed that the examination of the strategic function of narrative can equip the viewer to make sense of life by writing their own story. So considering the literature, considering my experience, I wanted to focus on 2 questions. How does the film text of Shawshank provide tools and language for viewers facing unchangeable circumstances? And then how can the viewer use the film to create her own tools for navigating identity and ontology? So methodology, I looked at 3 specific scenes from Shawshank Redemption. Hope is a dangerous thing, get busy living or get busy dying, and the escape. And I outlined these from the online version of the script in the paper. Along with equipment for living, I looked at 2 additional theories from the rhetorical tradition. And I looked at Zhang et al.'s use of this expression rhetorical theatrical, suggesting that the rhetoric of theatrical drama could be applied to the social dramas of life. And then I looked at symbolic convergence theory and particularly rhetorical vision. And of course, as part of the methodology, I examined my own family story. So conveniently to this project, the trailer for the Shawshank Redemption has my 3 scenes in it. So I'm going to play this for you. It's going to be just under 2 minutes in length, and you'll probably have to turn the sound up, but I think it bears playing because it's the perfect illustration of the 3 points and places that I felt like that Shawshank Redemption really does have a lesson for someone facing an unbeatable circumstance.
By the state of Maine, I hereby order you to serve 2 life sentences back to back, one for each of your victims. So be it.
Andy came to Shawshank Prison in 1947. Why'd you do it?
I didn't, since you ask.
You can fit right in. I must admit, I didn't think much of Andy first time I laid eyes on him. He had a quiet way about him. A walk and a talk that just wasn't normal around here.
There are places in the world that aren't made out of stone. There's something inside they can't touch.
What are you talking about?
Hope.
Let me tell you something, my friend. Hope is a dangerous thing.
Damn it, you friend, you're putting me behind.
Hope can drive a man insane.
You better be sick or dead in there, I kid you not.
I better get used to that idea.
Oh, my holy God.
I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living, or get busy dying.
Get busy living, or get busy dying. That's damn right.
And there you have my 3 scenes. And they're very powerful even in the trailer. And so that data I used in comparison to the story of my family. That's my mom and her 5 children. And there were other parties involved, spouses, grandchildren, family, friends, beyond our little group here. But really, we're the ones who my mom came to, and we were the ones who drove the treatment protocol for her and supported her. So I really did focus on our story. And in the paper, I go into it in some detail. So moving from there into the analysis, I looked at 4 different areas where I felt that the Shawshank Redemption particularly worked as equipment for living, and particularly related to our family experience. So going through them, starting with film as a container of meaning, the text of the movie itself discusses issues that terminally ill patients face. Should you even have hope in the face of hopelessness? Does it matter to persevere? Is there a way out? And it presents a rhetorical vision of the power of hope that we as a family found very useful. Then narrative devices, the actual theatrical rhetorical, the prison metaphor really goes well with the death sentence of a terminal cancer diagnosis. The visuals of the film giving a visual of the perseverance and success in the face of difficulties. And then the movie providing language for difficult discussions. The title of the paper comes from the fact that we would use the expression Shawshanking it to describe a particularly difficult time. I'm really Shawshanking it. And particularly with a focus on the very final piece of Andy's escape, when he has to crawl through 500 yards of raw sewage. There were times that it felt like crawling through raw sewage, and we would use the expression Shawshanking it to indicate that it was worth persevering and continuing. Looking at the movie as an illustration of identity and ontology, the prisoners had to face the identity and reality of prison, and different characters navigated that in different ways. And then also terminally ill patient is put into a new reality when they get a diagnosis, and they have to negotiate a new identity. And there are options available in the go home, sit down and die, and the go home and get busy living choices. And then finally, looking at how the audience can be a meaning creator. And so understanding that each viewer can choose their own meaning and that they can actually learn from the tools of the story, of watching the story, how to write their own narrative. And so in the case of my mom, she actually did a thing called scripting. She wrote out what she wanted to happen for every appointment. She was constantly writing. And then we as a family had the opportunity to play different roles of different characters in that movie, putting ourselves in different positions. And finally, as a family, we decided that this would be a heroic story. And even though our mom didn't win, she didn't make it out of Shawshank, we were there to be able to support her and felt like she was pleased with what happened. And it felt like a hero's tale. So finally, as the conclusion, I conclude that Shawshank is equipment for dying. It models coping mechanisms for facing difficult and impossible situations. There's inspiration and advice in the text. There's a language that people can use to discuss, have difficult conversations. And then the way rhetoric is used in the story, then the person who views it can use that to know how to use rhetoric to create meaning, negotiate identity, and create an alternative reality that can be one of a hero, even if it's not heroic. So looking at some applications and further areas of study, I think it would be interesting to explore how film can be used in hospice protocol. Hospice and palliative care programs are the keepers of equipment for dying. And when you go through that process, it's not the doctors that talk to you about it, it's the hospice program and the hospice providers. So I think it would be interesting to look at other films that might be similar, prison metaphors, or just these impossible, unchangeable scenario films. And while Shawshank has a happy ending, maybe look at films that have less than happy endings that actually do address death of the hero or a failure. I think that there could be interesting equipment for dying in these movies as well. So wrapping up with the references, you'll see here, I'm going to click on that. Hard to read here. I have them all on my blog, which you can scroll down below this presentation and see. There's a reference to it there. And if you want to jot this down for future reference, I've put the link to the presentation here on this front slide. The references are below, as well as a link to my paper, should anyone want to read the paper. So thanks for your time, and look forward to looking at everyone else's presentations.